Hello and welcome to another episode of Necessities for Life. Today we are going to be removing this decking here and we're going to be putting a whole new decking system in with new balustrades, new steps. So we're going to go through the process on how to do your own decking at home. So the first thing we've got to do is we've got to take this lot out. So that's what we're going to crack on with first. Just going to quite simply use a few crowbars, a few hammers, screwdrivers if we need them. But we're going to basically dismantle the decking first. Okay, so I've got my old decking all cleared out and all done. There was a few weeds left behind there, so I've given them a quick spray just to finish those off. There's plenty of matting down already, but as I say, the weaker lot I've put down is going to kill off the rest of the ivy, so that won't be a problem again. So the first thing we've got to do, we know the decking is going to be 4.8 meters long. I'm not going to worry about the width just yet, but the first thing I've got to do is I've got to get this secured to the wall. I am using a 4x2 framework on this one, mainly because of the amount of supports I'm going to put in because it's a large area. If you're going to use fewer supports, you've got to go for a 6x2 framework. I'm putting quite a lot of support in to alleviate any bounce that's going to be in the decking. So what I'm going to do now is, now I've got my beam down there, I'm going to set it up. I know where my height is because I've marked it off with a little bit of white spray, which you can see just over here. This is going to be where my beam's going to go. So what I need to do now is I need to put this into place where it's going to go, and I need to mark off the holes where it's going to go. Okay, so where I'm going to want my holes, I've got quite a few. I'm going to use some anchor bolts for this because they're the most secure thing to do. For something like this, you don't want to be using like wall plugs and screws because they're just not going to be up to the job. You've got to use anchor bolts, which I'll show you what one of those is in a minute. So where we're going to fix these in, we want to be making sure that we are in the center of the brick. We don't want to be putting it in here on the mortar. We want to be in the middle of the brickwork. That's where it's going to get its most strength. So I'm going to go and get a rule plug, and I'll show you, not a rule plug, sorry, an anchor bolt, and I'm going to show you what I mean. Here's my anchor bolt. Basically with this, all it does is, this is your effectively like what you'd consider like your wall plug bit, this bit just here. Take it out so you can see it. That'll be what goes actually inside the brickwork. Then your bolt goes through your wood and it'll bolt all the way inwards. There we go. And basically as it gets tighter, let's just wind it all the way up. There we go. So as you wind it all the way up, you can see now as you keep winding it, the centerpiece there just pulls up and it just spreads it all the way across, and that basically will then grip in. So that's what we're going to be using for this. Hence why we need to make sure that everywhere one of these goes in, it's going to be in the center of the brickwork. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to mark these up now. At this point, I'm not overly going to worry about the actual level of this. This is just the point that I now need to mark up to know where I'm going to put my holes into the wood so it sits into the middle of the brickwork. Like I say, we don't want to be going into the mortar here because that's not a good place. We want to be in the middle of these bricks here. Okay, so as you can see, got my first marker here. I've got a nice big block of paint. This is the actual level of bricks that this beam is going to sit onto. So I know now that I can put one in the middle of here. That's one marker there. Okay, just going to make a little note to remember which way around this goes on the brickwork. I'm just going to put an arrow on it. Right, now I've got that piece in. That piece is now up, ready marked. I'm going to now drill my holes. Using M10, we're using M10 bolts on this, so I need to make sure that I drill 10mm hole goes through this to give me clearance. Then I can make my markers, try and get it leveled up, see where it's going to be level, and then I can drill the actual masonry side of it. So I'm going to go and get my drill set up, and I'm going to start drilling some holes. Okay, the next thing we want to just double check when we're doing this one now is we know where this end is going to go here, and we also know that end. We've got our markers for the brickwork, but it's all very well using a spirit level at this point, but as you can see with this one, we've got the beam, because of the weight, is just slightly curving it down. So what I've done is I've got my string line out, just here, you can see that, I've got a string line out, and all I'm going to do at one end is I'm just going to pull it tight and I can see that there is a bow in the middle of it, so we know where the brickwork's got to be. I'm going to run my spirit level along the level of bricks to make sure that that's okay, and then I know where then I've got to get them fixed into. Okay, so my line of bricks is actually okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to work to that as being my datum, so I can get this lifted up slightly under here a little bit, and then I can pull this bit out of there. So I'll get my first one drilled, I'll get my first one sort of loosely bolted in so I can undo it again to take it out, and then I can go along and then I can drill all my other holes. So I'm going to crack on, I'm going to get that done now. Yesterday we managed to get our outside beams put into the wall there. Today we've got to try and get the beam to go across from there to here to meet the corner. What I'm going to use for this is I've got my laser line out, because obviously it's going to be difficult to work it out, and sometimes the timber bends slightly in the middle, so trying to get a straight line or level line is quite difficult when you're using spirit level. So what I've got here is I've got this little device. This is a Huper spirit level. Basically it's a green line, but it also comes with a pulse function, so it has a receiver box, because sometimes you can't see the green light, especially when it's sunlight like this. How this works is you get your level set up. This will go on this beam here. I've got a nice flat line, so basically that means now that it's all set up and ready to go, and that is now level. So when I put my beam on that side, I can put that on. When it beeps like this, I know I've got the correct level. It has a little indicator on it. It tells you whether it's got to go up or down, and I've got that set up. So I'm going to measure up and get my next lot of beams ready to go in. Okay, I've got my preliminary height that where I need it. It's not quite accurate enough. So what I've done is I've put my upright support in. I've put a block in to support the frame, so the frame now moves independently. I can now put my level on, and now I can just raise it using some shims of some sort, just to get it to where the line's going to stop beeping at me. So still need to go up slightly more on that one. And there we go, it's now stopped beeping at me. So now I've got that. Now this is now level all the way across. I can now just put this in here, and now my framework all the way across from this side to that side. I've now got this level. I can now start going in and working out where my cross beams are going to go. We're not going to worry too much at the minute about getting the beam straight. I'm going to string line this. Once I've got my framework in, I'm going to string line it and then put some support posts in and around it to make sure it's level. But again, I'm just going to use this to do that later on. So for now, I'm going to start getting some middle beams fixed in. We're aiming roughly for about 40mm centre on the beams that go across, but it might be ever so slightly different. We'll just make adjustments where we need it to. So I'm going to go ahead now, and I'm going to get all my beams cut and get them ready to go into size, into place. Okay, so I've gone along the back there and I've worked out roughly what my space is going to be. There is a handy little formula which I will post on the screen somewhere, so you can actually kind of sort of follow it. It's not 100% accurate, but it's not far off. Overall on this one, I was about 5mm out, so I've just trimmed off my 5mm. Now I've got two spaces the same size, and that'll give me equal spacing all the way along. I will put that in the description, and I'll post a little link on how to calculate the formula. It is quite handy and it does work relatively well. It's not far off out. It's normally 2 or 3mm out, and in my case it was 5mm over a long distance, but that's nothing. So I just trim these off to 5mm, but I'll show you how to do that. But basically, once you've got your first piece cut, all you do is you take your space that you've made, because you've calculated it roughly what it's going to be, and all you do is basically you just go along, you put that in between a beam, so a little bit like, I'll see if I can show you down on here. So all you do is when you've got your rough calculation, you put your spacer in, you put it on there like that, make a little marker, and you basically just move it along, and that'll give you a rough calculation of where your beam needs to be. Okay, so what we're using here to attach these onto this side, because obviously the beams, the actual deck boards are going to run lengthways, so we've got to put the beams acrossways. I've got these joist hangers. I'm going to have to trim some of these. I'm going to have to trim these off later. But what I've done is I've attached it to my beam so it's ready. I've got it nice and flush there. I've got my spacer in here, just in there. Now that's in, I can go ahead and I can start screwing these in. Okay, so that's that side in, and then this side over here, just going to screw these in. Again, I've got my spacer in, got my spacer attached in here. I can see where the beam's got to go to. Just going to straighten that up. All the time making sure that it stays flush with the original side piece, that side beam there. Once that's in, I can take my spacer out and I can fasten two more in from the other side. That's it, that's nicely in. And all we're going to do is going to do the same all the way along, just put our spacer in on both sides. And also, because I'm not entirely sure this whole frame is completely square, I'm going to have to measure each one of these individually. This one's slightly different. I'm going to have to put the next beam in because I've got to do a little diversion around here, because we've got to put a frame in. We've got to put a frame in just around here, around this drain pipe, so it can actually be accessed at any point. So I need to put this beam in, then I can put that one in, and then I can screw a beam in the middle here, and then I've got a good surrounding area around that. So I'm going to carry on and I'll see you shortly. Okay, so when you're trying to fit the beams in and you're working on like an elevated platform, trying to fit them in and keep them sort of level with trying to fit them in is a little bit tricky. So I'm going to show you a little tip here. So I've got my spacer block in here to keep my width right between the two beams. So I've clamped that in so I haven't got to hold that in place. I've also found a little offcut piece which I've clamped underneath. That'll just, when I put it up on the other side, one sec. Okay, so that'll keep this one in place. It's not just in place yet because I'm going to fasten that side over on first, and then I can come back to this side and it's already going to be roughly in the right sort of height. Trying to hold it up level and screw them in at each end is just a no-go if you're pretty much on your own. So you have to find any way to help sort of do that. The next thing I've got here, except for the fact I've just lost me clamps, I'm going to reset that. There you go, I've got that put back on properly now. So the next thing I've got over here is, because I'm using joist hangers, it's a bit difficult to put that in to get the level right on that. Plus the fact I've got protruding bolts here as well. So I've set this one up here a little bit here, so I can put that on there. That sort of stays in place. Then I can bring my timber up and I can match it up to it there. And then I can then work easier. Now it's held up at the other end. So just a little helpful hint there, just to help you out if you are working on your own and struggling a little bit. Okay, as you can see there, I've put in all my cross beams in. Next thing we need to do is, I'll just show you on that. Next thing we need to do is we need to put some noggins in here now, just to give it an extra support, just to take any bounce that way out of it. It's not going to move. We're not going to worry about getting all the levels right yet. The first thing you've got to do is get this base complete. So next thing is we're going to have to cut all of these to get these fitted in. They're literally just going to go in there in 3 places just to take out that lateral movement there. So we know what size they are because we've been using these as a spacer to space out the beams where they're going to sit. So now we can go ahead and we can get all of these cut to the right size, and then we can mark them up where we're going to go. We want to try and get them in a nice straight line, slightly offset, but I'll show you that in a second. Okay, so I've got all my little noggins cut. I'm going to start going ahead. I'm going to show you how we fit them. So basically what we're going to want to do is, starting at using this wall here, as a bit of a datum point, we're going to divide it by 2 and then divide those figures by 2, and then we're going to use those measurements all the way across, draw 3 straight lines, and then we're just going to put the noggins in either side of those lines. So let's go and get them all. Let's go and show you how we're going to mark them up, starting at this side over here. So we've got a total measurement of 410, so we're going to do a marker at 205 because that's halfway, which is, and then 102.5 is going to be our next run. So the next one is 308. So what we're going to do is just going to go along all of these now, mark them off at 308 on each one. That's all my 308s marked out. So now I'm going to go and mark all the rest of them up. All of my noggins are all marked up and they're all in, and all I've got to do, I've got them all cut, all I've got to do is put them in each side of the line. So here's two of my little noggins here that I've cut. And as you can see, I've got my lines drawn on here. You might not be able to see. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to put them either side of the beam so they're staggered like that all the way along from front to back. And that'll basically take out all of that lateral movement. So I can go ahead now and I can start getting all those fixed in, and I'll show you what it looks like when we've done that bit. So let's go and fit some noggins. Okay, so we've gone ahead now. We've got all of our concrete pads now fully installed all the way. There's 16 in total. Next thing we do is we've got to get, we'll put the corner post in there. And then once we've got that in, we'll know it's all nice and level then. Then we can start using a string line to set up all the other levels to make sure it's nice and level all the way across. It's got, using a trusty fence post, which we've got here, we don't need to worry about the level of that. But all we're going to do is basically we want to have a shoulder put into this to cut it on so the actual frame sits on top of it. What I don't want to do is screw the frame onto the side of it. Let's have a look. There we go. Yeah, what I don't want to do is to just screw the frame onto the side of it, which a lot of people possibly may do, mainly because when you put the screws on, there's a lot of weight then sitting on the screws, and the frame is quite heavy, so it might actually just drop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shoulder it, so I'm going to cut a section out, so it'll sort of sit in the post, sort of a little bit like that, so basically it'll sit on the top. Then I can screw it on once it's sitting on the top, and I've got all the weight actually sitting on the frame as opposed to on the side of it. So what we need to do is find a pencil and we're going to mark it up. Okay, on my concrete pad there, I'm literally just going to drop it in to where I want it, which is there. So a little bit of stuff underneath that. There we go. Right, so it's now sitting nice and flat on there. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a mark underneath it, like so. And there we go. It needs to be on the top actually, doesn't it, as well? So we also need to put a line on the top of it to know where we're going to cut it off. Right, so we now have our two lines drawn just there. This line here is the level of the actual framework, so we're actually going to cut just slightly lower than that, just so it sits below the framework level, and then we're going to shoulder it off. So I'm going to cut it to length first. So I've got my first one cut, and there you go. Now you can see what it's like. So basically now my framework will sit on top of there. That's below the line, as you can see, so it won't disturb me when I put my decking across and it sits in there, because we want it to run across. If it was slightly lower, then the decking would be raised up by these bits, so I'd have to trim them off, but that's absolutely perfect for what we want. Now because these bits, this bit here is going to be it that's on the ground, and these are the bits that are going to likely, if anything's going to rot out, it's going to be these. So I'm actually going to use roof felt adhesive, and I'm going to paint around the bottom of it, and that'll stop any water from being absorbed up in the future and make it last even longer. All I'm going to do is just give it a nice paint all the way around the bottom and a little bit up the post. Let's get that handle out of the way. And there we go. That is now nicely painted up, and it's now ready to go in. Okay, I'm going to use 3 screws to attach it in, and I go from the outside over to the inside of it, from the outside to the in. And there we go, that's the first post fitted in. As you can see, it's got a nice bitumen around the bottom of it. It's not going to go anywhere, it's at the right height. I can now take my other framework off that supports it, and then we're ready to start trying to level the rest of the frame up with the string line. We know that the end over there is nice and level, we know that that's level, and we know that this one here is level. So we've got a little bit of a bow in the middle of that, so I'll string line it from one side to the other, and then I'll set these ones in. I'll set these ones in first that I've got 3 more to go in there. Is it 3? Yep, 3 more posts to go in there to keep it elevated, and then I can do all the middle ones by running string line across it diagonally, different directions, and that'll get it to be perfectly level all the way across. Okay, so what we've got is, I've got my string line on there, running from there over to the far side. Now, there is a dip in the middle, which you can now see. So I'm going to pop my bag inside there. I've already fitted one in. These actually come with a pack of 2, but they're absolutely brilliant. So I can clearly see my blue line here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to inflate the bag up, which is a bit difficult from this angle, but here we go. There we go. It's now touching my blue line all the way across. So now what I can do is I can fit my upright support and then see how it goes. So I'm going to make sure this is nicely bedded into the ground there. There we go, that's better. Right, okay, so I've got that level now. I can go ahead and I can fit this middle post here, and then that'll leave me clear for doing the other 2 there. I've got all my uprights in. You can see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 8, 12, 16. We've got 16 supports all in. All the bouncers now gone out of the framework. It's all nice and level. All the bottoms have been painted with blackjack, so it stops any water absorbing up through them. So next thing to do is to start cracking on with the actual decking itself. Now, we're fitting a handrail on this. So the first thing I've got to do is I've got to work out at what point and what height my handrails go to. This is all finished, and we're now getting ready to install our posts. These are our posts now for the decking handrail system we're going to use. Now I've measured the handrail. I've measured the handrail and the base and the post, and it comes to 99 centimeters. So what we've got here is at the top here, we've got this little bit here, but we want the handle to be below this. So I'm going to measure 99 now I'm going to measure 99 from this point here downwards, so I know where my mark's going to be. So we've got 99, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to allow an extra half a centimetre, so I'm going to mark this off, or I'm actually going to mark it off at 1 metre. So on each one of the posts I'm going to put in, I'm going to mark them off at 1 metre. But I've also got to include my deck board, which is on here, just there. So we need it to be 99 from that point there. So let's have a look. Yeah. If I now mark 99, I've got my 1 metre mark. Now I can put my deck board over the top of it, and I can draw another line. And now we're going to measure that. Let's have a look. So on each one of these now, I've got 9.5 bottom mark, so we're going to go with 103. So that's 103 centimetres is my baseline of where I'm going to actually install my post. And all we're going to do is we're going to fit the post into here, into there, and we're going to screw it into place on that line. So when I put my decking board on there, the handrail will then fit into the right place. And then I'm just going to get that one clamped up and onto it. Now level my line at the bottom, so I can now put my spirit level on it. I can bring it into straightness. There we go. That's the point that I want this one in. So that's our first post now successfully installed. It's in, it's nice and level, and it's on there. Now we can do one at the other end, and then we've got to work out where the two middle one's going to go, because we've got to put the steps in. I've got my two end posts now in. I've got my stairway just here. Hopefully you can see that. There you go. I've got my stairway uprights in place. So that's now going to give me, they're in the middle. I've calculated how wide my step's going to be, and I've got it there. I've made two little markers either side of it, and that's where I'm going to put my upright posts in on the inside of it. So that's going to be then ready to go on. So now I can go ahead and I can now fix those ones on too. So, okay. I've got my posts up, and the first thing I've got to do is got to put the fascia boards on the decking. So now we have to talk about decking boards. As you can see, they look like they can be installed either way. However, this is not quite true. Decking should be fitted with the big grooves, these ones, facing downwards. Reason why: when they're sitting on the beams, these are going to provide a little bit more airflow underneath and across the beams that it's sitting on. This is more grippy. This is the correct side to install your decking boards. Not like that. Some people do install them like that. This is actually the wrong way, and they shouldn't actually be fitted this way. These aren't multi-directional. So this is the correct way. These facing downwards. So you get the airflow underneath across these through the gaps, can make your decking last a lot longer. So I'm going to now install my front panels, and then I can put my stair bits in, and then we're ready to fit the rest of the deck boards. Now we're putting the deck boards on. What you don't want to do is fit them butt to butt like that. You don't want to fit them close together, because that's not going to allow, these will actually expand and contract in different weathers. So we need to allow a little bit of gap. How much of a gap? I go with 3mm. So I've got a little 3mm spacer I'm going to put on, and that's going to be enough. You won't see down through the gaps, but it's enough to space them apart on each one of them. My decking boards are going in. I've made my first cut, so I've got it round the post quite nicely. I've screwed them in on every other beam. You don't need to screw them in on every single beam. Obviously those two they're at the end, so I've just done those, but I'm keeping them even all the way along, trying to keep them in line. So what have we done down here? What we've got is we've got this panel here, so we need to be able to get to this drain here. So what I've done is I've just added some extra additional beams just around the outside of it there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these in, and I'm going to make a little box up, so that will sit in, and I'm just going to make a little box up and attach them together, so this section here will be able to be lifted out, and the same on that section there. It's not particularly tidy, but it's just to give the decking a bit of strength. So again, I'll just run a length of timber underneath it, just so I can drill some holes in it, so it can just be an access panel to get down to that drain there again. So that's what we've done. About that, let's do some balustrading. What does the balustrade consist of? What we have is we have a base rail. This is the bottom. This goes on the bottom there, and it screws in along the bottom of the decking. We also have your top rail. Now this comes with, that's already fitted inside, is one of these here. This fits nice and snugly when I can get it to go in. it fits in nice and snugly in there. Now we're going to use these to cut them down into individual pieces to space out the spindles. I will show you that in a minute. Okay, and we have the spindles, lots of them. How do we fit this? Okay, because we've got quite a lot and we've got to go between these two, we've got to go between this post here and this post here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut our base rail to size and we're going to cut our top rail to size. So let's go and get that done. One base rail, one handrail, cut and ready to go. How far do these need to be apart? There is a regulation that stipulates they have to be no more than 4 inches. It's about 100 mil of a 100 mil gap. So we're going to work out now how many we're going to need roughly to fill that at roughly 4 inches. Now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get that worked out of how many spindles I'm going to need. Okay, so I've got them spaced out at roughly 4 inches. Let's line. There's various sites that do it. There are calculators out there which tell you how far to do it. So you put in your width of your posts, so basically your length of the balustrade. You then put in how many posts you want and it'll calculate your gap for you. Now, that's when this piece comes in. That's where this piece comes in. So once we've worked out our gap, we're going to cut this piece down, which comes in the handrail. We're going to cut this down to the measurement that it says on the guide. I've used a calculator. I was right on 9 spindles, and it also gave me a calculation of 8.91 per spacer. So I've actually cut them to 8.9 because trying to get 8.91 centimeters is very, very difficult. So I've got all these cut. Now, my next tip is to number them in the order. So 1 to 10. So that's the order we're going to fit, because if there is any discrepancy between them, we won't end up with them all being uneven across the top. So we number them and then we can fit those in. So what do we do now? All we're going to do is we've got our spindles, got my number 1 there. I'm going to lay it on its side, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to put number 1 spacer in the gap. I'm going to bring in my rail and I'm then going to screw that in there, knowing that that spacer is then right. And then I'm going to use number 2, number 3, number 4, so on and so far in that gap. And then I'll show you what we do with that afterwards. One thing I've got to do is tell you how to attach them. So basically we're going to put the base rail on its side. We're going to line this up. I'm also using that to go underneath my spindle to put it in, because it actually brings it up to the right height, keeps it nice and central. And all I'm going to do is put my spacer in, line it up, and I'm going to put a screw in through the bottom straight into the spindle itself. There we go. I've now got them all attached. There's my base rail, there's all my rails attached. I've now taken my spacers out, and the next thing we've got to do is we've got to take our handrail here. Now we've got our handrail, and what we're going to do is we're going to use our spacers again. We're going to put them in so it sits in on there, and we've got to attach those in. So we're just going to screw those in. I'm going to use a 4x45 to screw those in. But all we're going to do is we're going to put a spacer in. So we've got the spacer in, sorry. Then we're going to put a spindle in, so we know where to screw it. And then we're just going to work along doing the same thing. So I'll do the first one, then show you what I've done. So there we go. I've done a few there. So all I've done is gone along, put my spacer in, move my spindle along, put it up to the last one, drop it in, move it along again. This is why I like to number them, so I know which order they go in, because then if there's any discrepancy in the actual size of them, it'll accumulate, because then they're going to be exact same spacer per gap. Okay, so now we've got all those in, I've got to remember that I've got to attach this into place, and I'm going to have to screw it from underneath in a diagonal. So I need to take the first one out that I put in, first spacer, and I'm going to put it aside just for now, so I know where it is. And I've also left the last one. Out. Right, next thing you do is we've got to raise the balustrade. Okay, all we're going to do is going to pick the balustrade up, get it into place where we want it, and then we can screw it down. Once you're happy, get your screws and screw it into place. Okay, that's that done. Right, I'm going to go and get a drill, because the next thing I want to do is, when I've got this into place, I want to put a screw in through here. So I'm going to put a diagonal in, but I'm going to want to put a pilot hole through this so I can get it to go through a bit nicer. I'm going to do one at both sides. That's my 2 holes drilled. Next thing is, the next battle is, now we've got to feed these into place, which is easier said than done. Bit of a fiddle, so I'm just going to work it out. Basically, the holes you've got on the top, these spindles have to fit in them. It's a bit of a jigsaw, so I'm going to get that done rather than you watching. Right, there we go. That's the balustrade in, all screwed in. They've gone at an angle. I always put a clamp on these, because I don't know if you've ever aware that if you're drilling at an angle, sometimes it tries to push things upwards. So I put that on there, just keeps it in place. So when I'm drilling into it, keeps it nice and flat, and that's all in. And that is how we install a balustrade. I've already put my spaces back in there in each end, and as you can see, they're now nice, they're in, and they're lovely and secure. One nice handrail in already. Right, okay, so now we have completely and done and finishing. We've got all my balustrades up, the steps are in, and all the boards are down, and it's got a front on it which it didn't have before. There we go, nice little side on view there. There we go, that's the decking finished. Hopefully you can hopefully that'll help you if you decide that you're going to do a decking on your own at home. If there's any questions that you got, please don't forget to put them in the comments. This has been another episode of Necessities of Life on how to build a decking.